We're going to start our afternoon with a panel discussion. We now explore the most important conversations in modern sales education. Many of the theme has resonated in the morning's programming. The role of humans, us, our students, navigating the age of AI is the topic today, where it's going to be moderated by the one and only Karen Kelly of K2 Perform, who has been a regular on stage with us last year and a regular attendee over the years. So thank you very much, Karen. I'm going to pass the mic over to you. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you, Patrick. Okay, how did everyone enjoy lunch? It was good. I need to get the recipe for that salad dressing. Okay, I'm delighted to be moderating this panel discussion, and it's great to have it at this point in the day, because we started, who knows how we started, I'm sure we came at different levels, but we've seen so much and we've had hands-on experience with AI that we're now at a point to really get different perspectives. So I feel this is a timely in the day to have this discussion. The panel discussion is the role of humans in sales, so navigating the age of AI. And I would like to offer up my esteemed panelists here to start and introducing themselves, a little bit about yourself. Why don't we start with Matthew?
Great. Thanks, Karen. Matthew Nicole here. I'm the president and CEO of the Institute of Sales Professionals. Also, in my spare time, I teach at UNB in their MBA faculty, and one of the very few programs across the country that actually has a sales concentration at the graduate level. And looking forward to the conversation with my fellow panelists.
Hey everybody, I'm still Roger. That's a good one. Excuse me. Good afternoon. My name's Eric McCluskey. I'm a regional vice president with Fastenal Company. For those of you that don't know, Fastenal Company is a global supplier of industrial products and construction services. So we're in 23 countries around the world. My role and responsibility is fiscal responsibility for the business in Ontario, Quebec, and Manitoba. And just to give you perspective, you know, our organization size will be about $8 billion USD in revenue this year. And the Canadian business is about 2 years away from being $1 billion in revenue. So I've been with the organization for 26 years.
Hi, everybody. My name is Brennan Summers. I'm the Vice President of Corporate Development at an education technology company called Stu-Kent. And I know many of you use us, enjoy us, and we're always trying to get better. I spent my career on Capitol Hill in Washington, D.C. And when Levi, our Vice President of Sales, told me that I needed to come to this, he said my only rule was I was not allowed to talk politics with the Canadians, which I've already violated. So we're careful with stereotypes in today's society, but the one stereotype that's absolutely been true is how kind Canadians are. So being from the States, you guys have been nothing but hospitable, and it's been lovely being in this country. So thank you for welcoming me.
Nice. Thank you, everybody. So just to get an assessment from the audience, I just want to get a consensus here. If you think about 10 being, I'm very proficient, confident, use AI all the time, love it, and 1 being not really sure what it is, kind of afraid of it, let's just get a sense of where you're at so we can tailor the responses to it. So how many people would be below 5? Show of hands if you're less than 5 on the scale. Okay, a few, that's okay. Thank you for your honesty. Who would be at 5? Okay, 6? Few 6s, 7? Okay, 8? 9? Oh, I'm not going to say 10 because it's evolving so quickly. Even if you're at a 10, it's not going to last for long. Okay, so it looks like, just for your own information, a 7, 8 is where we're at. So we can modify our responses. And the whole thing is, you know, to open our perspectives. And we're coming in through one lens, whatever number you're at, but we might get invited to think differently or approach it differently based on the various perspectives we're going to get today. And that's the goal, is when you leave here, you're going to think differently about it. Maybe where you had a hesitation or reservation, you're like, I'm going to try that now, okay? Hyperbound. You know, we all picked up her phone and tried something that might have been fearful for us, but we have to model the behavior for our students. So to get going, we hear the term AI in sales often, but it can mean so many things to so many people. So to level set, why don't we get the panelists to share from their perspective, what does that look like in practice today? Just so we can get a baseline of what it looks like. Brandon, why don't we start over at your end? There's 2 mics that you just share the mics.
All right, Karen, what does AI look like in practice today
Yeah.
for an education technology like StuKent? It really is our whole sales cycle in the early stages of lead gen. We got to see a great presentation on the coaching portion of AI and how that works. But based on where we are at a certain time of the year, AI looks different for us. Early in the year, it's a lot of forecasting. We use AI to kind of play out how we think the year should look and where we should focus. And then content production, a lot of AI used to generate content. So for us, every day we're using AI, and what's a challenge is employees are all somewhere on that 0 scale with AI, and they're on that 10 scale, and the individuals you send us as former students to employees now fall somewhere on that, and we're trying to figure out how do we scale everybody up. But AI, it doesn't mean something, doesn't mean the same thing to everybody at our company at the same time, and that's a challenge in and of itself.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree with a lot of what was just said. I think that, from our organization standpoint, we're utilizing AI to create some efficiencies, to enhance processes that would be normally handled manually, that would take longer periods of time. From our business, we're a customer-facing business, so I think, utilizing AI exclusively would have to mean that we're going to change our business model incredibly. So we're also an organization that likes to develop our own technology and processes, sometimes to our own detriment. So, so we've started to incorporate AI through partnering with Microsoft into our own internal systems, which helps us to efficiently navigate through sourcing of product, creating price files, communication with the customer from that perspective. But there's a broad range of acceptance, not only from internally from our organization standpoint, but also from our customers' perspective. Because we're in an industry and an environment where, by and large, our model has been for the last 60 years customer-facing, face-to-face. So utilizing AI, and incorporating that too quickly would shift our business model tremendously, and we're not ready to take that risk yet.
Mm-hmm.
I think my perspective is technology is only good when it serves human goals, so we should try and use AI to the extent that our buyers value it, and that's interpreted by individuals.
Thank you. Okay, Matthew?
Yeah, I think from 2, use cases. The first is from a practitioner's perspective. I would think the better definition at this juncture where we are with technology and the sales process is, I would call it augmented intelligence versus artificial intelligence. So what we're trying to do is we're saying, what can we augment with technology to enhance the buying experience? So a quick little use case would be, if you're going to show up to Fortune 500, Fortune 1000, C-level engagement, and you're a business development exec representing your company, you could leverage a bunch of research tools that can pull data points about the organization with regards to perhaps their publicly traded documents, different insights from the social web, scrape that down and help inform a great discussion with a initial conversation from a practitioner perspective. As well, from a student's perspective, us educators in the room, it's how can we augment students with tools and resources to be able to enhance their learning experience.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. So just when you look at a snapshot of the diversity of what the gentlemen up here represent, forecasting, improving efficiencies in process, augmented versus artificial. So already there's different use cases that maybe you can think about how you could implement that in your own environment. So there's a lot of buzz with AI. We talked about it today. I'm sure you're hearing about it in your classroom or wherever your environment is, but there's also fear. And so what are the biggest misconceptions you see about AI in sales today? And why don't we start with Roger?
I think that there is just a lack of philosophy about how we should integrate this technology into how people work, and that it requires going right back to fundamental questions of philosophy, like what is the function of people in work, for example. I think the only way that this can go well is if people recognize that even 10 years from now, there will still be things that are scarce about what technology can provide. And sooner or later, we'll all have to make a change in order to reach that state. That is not an easy thing, though. And I think anytime something like that happens, it just requires a lot of communication between people who are as experienced as possible. I'd argue the people here are the most experienced to help people navigate that. You can imagine that people with less experience than yourself would probably be feeling this in an even more overwhelming way. So I'd say the misconception is in sales is less about how does it make you more efficient and more just how can you use it to help your buyer overcome their overwhelm and deficits that exist in their trust. Hopefully helpful.
Okay, so flipping the lens and not looking at it, what it can do for you, but how can it help your buyer? Excellent. Matthew.
Yeah, sure. I would think about it from the perspective of if your foundational go-to-market and your foundational messaging strategy is not on point with your buyer's journey and buyer's experience, it's sort of like do more dumb, because there's so much technology in the MarTech stack that if your core messaging is not good, you're just going to do more things that are not that effective. So I think there's this notion of technology and progress in a linear fashion. We tend to think about linear. As technology evolves, it's more of a progression. And I would say that that's probably the fallacy, is to think of it in a linear fashion, because perhaps your customer and their journey is more soft skill, high touch type engagement. So we wouldn't want to plunk a ton of technology into that type of customer engagement, because that's how they want to be used. So I think that's the assumption is, you know, oh yeah, let's do what Salesforce is doing. Let's do what Microsoft is doing. That may not be the best depending on who your ICP and personas are.
I think, excuse me, also from my perspective is that, you know, you can't get into an environment or a situation where you exclusively trust, you know, the guidance and direction that the technology is providing for you. I think that, you know, some people may look at it that it's without fault. You know, that's the best and the proper guidance. There's some errors in there today as they continue to hone and refine it. But the other piece of that too as well, if you think about it from a sales perspective, is that, you know, the reference to, you know, we still have buyers that make decisions. You know, we're not having technology sell to technology. I guess if that was the case, maybe, you know, the success rate would be 100%. But we have to, you know, also consider that if you're exclusively taking the guidance and direction from the technology itself, that may look, you know, from the person on the receiving end, the person that's making the decision, that, you know, there's less value in the relationship. There's less value in understanding their business. We have a, you know, a sales process that we're taking the easiest pathway, which is giving us direction from a technology perspective. And again, you know, I speak from being in an organization where we're customer facing. You know, our business units or our business locations are close in proximity to our end users, so that we can provide that face-to-face, that daily, that communication, so that we truly understand their business needs and environments through, you know, experience and communication. But then we can meet and exceed those expectations. That creates a lot more wins for us than, you know, guidance given from technology.
I think many of us are tempted to overestimate what AI will do to upend society in the short run, and then we underestimate what it will do to upend society in the long run. So I think we feel a lot of anxiety about what is coming tomorrow with AI, when it may be wiser to say, well, what comes in a decade's time with AI and prepare. But I would say the largest misconception comes with the concept that it is a silver bullet. And I don't think it is. Organizations, particularly sales organizations that have toxicity in their DNA, will not be suddenly made healthy and right with AI, and those are things that have to be fixed outside of machine learning.
Okay, thank you. So just what I heard there was two things. Whatever message you have, your baseline is going to amplify that. So if it's a weak message, you're going to amplify that at scale, but it's still a weak message. And really, the fundamentals have to be in place, those foundational core skills that you have to put into the prompt, and it's going to build on it. Otherwise, we totally lose sight of who's on the receiving end of that, right? And like Matthew said, if it's someone who's more soft skills, they don't want to talk to you have to adapt and meet them where they're at. So all great points. AI is great at speed and scale, but in your opinion, where do humans still outperform machines, and how do we protect that edge? So when you think about the classroom, they haven't gone out into the real world yet. So we want to protect that humanity so that when they do go out and they do maybe join a sales force, it's not completely overridden. So what are ways we can do that? Eric, let's start with you.
I think in ways that it can help, obviously it can help generate ideas that are going to be involved in the plan. Whatever that might be. It'll give you that guidance and direction as to how to navigate through a certain situation or an environment with your customer. I think where it's obviously not as effective is in the execution of that plan. And I think that that's where, from an efficiency standpoint or a speed of designing the plan, it can really be helpful. But I think, when we have to think about where the rubber meets the ground, those are processes and activities that are generated by people, the humans, the people that work for your organization and that help drive those results. So that's where I see it most valuable.
I'm betting on humankind in a couple areas, one of which we learned about earlier is the emotional intelligence, the trust building, and the relationship building. I think those are areas where humankind and interpersonal communication flourish, and I think those are all very important parts of what we do every day to succeed. And there are large places where AI can help amplify that, but the core fundamental of trust, relationship building, and that emotional intelligence is where I would stick with humans on that front.
I think one way to tell this would be an analogy. So if you think about getting on an airline flight, autopilot can, tech capability-wise, get the plane basically from gate to gate at this point. There's a reason, though, that we trust the process of getting on the plane, which is that the pilot, who is an expert, joins us on the plane. And there's a form of skin in the game and human governance over that system. And that's a system that's been automated with high reliability for a long time. There's also people that are responsible for the quality of that system and ensuring that it's flying in the highest possible state of quality. Planes have to fly in a like-new state, and I would argue the same thing will be true of companies. They always have to have a high level of readiness and responsiveness to what customers need. And finally, there's the people that are actually going up and down the aisle, providing customer service as well as problem solving. All of these things, I think, in companies will remain human roles in the way that they do in planes. And there's probably an analogy for every role that exists that is required to get a plane from point A to point B, where the computer can do the entire flying part of that.
I'm just going to share a story with everyone. There Karen is. Hi, Karen. Singling out Karen, 2 years ago, she hosted at TMU the GSSI, essentially universities that have sales programs, and AI was a theme as it relates to education. And sort of at the end of the conference, we're saying, okay, well, don't just let it be theoretical. Try to implement it in your syllabus. So I took that literally verbatim, and I implemented. This is just around the time that ChatGPT 3.5 was out, the very first OpenAI, and it was becoming popular. And I remember as teaching at the time, our dean had a big session about plagiarism, obviously, which we're all kind of going through. And I said, you know what? Let's try it. So I designed a human versus machine experience with my MBA class. And what I did was I said, here's the architecture of the competition. We're going to have one human group do a SWOT analysis, and I believe we chose, oh yeah, it was Bell Canada. Do a SWOT analysis on Bell Canada in your collective groups, and then we're going to have another team that's just literally going to use any AI technology out there. Then we're going to compare and contrast who provided the best SWOT analysis in terms of the depth and the breadth. And would you believe, anyone hazard a guess as to who won? Okay, every single group destroyed the bots by miles. When you have groupthink and you have humans involved with the process using the prefrontal cortex, there's just some things you cannot replace. And they absolutely destroyed any analysis that the AI bots had produced. So that's my story. Obviously, there's a lot of use cases for us using our prefrontal cortex and thinking things more broadly in a number of different perspectives, historical, social, cultural, and I guess one other small use case is, yes, okay, let's use tech, but let's make the last mile human. So yeah, I'll use a piece of tech to develop a demand gen email, but the last mile, I do the personalization on the last mile.
Thank you for that. Does anyone else have any examples of an application of that human element for the classroom? Because that's a great example. I feel some of the students now are thinking that, ChatGPT is way smarter than them, and what's the point of going up against it? But there's a prime example of, the human element won there. Is there any examples or thoughts or ideas you have about how others could implement something like this in the classroom?
So I was at a conference recently where Mr. Khan, the founder of Khan Academy, was on stage with Mr. Gates, founder of Microsoft, and they were having the conversation about AI and what this looks like. And I think it's important as we think of the pipeline of industry and employer through academia all the way down to, at some point, some kid learned his alphabet. And Khan Academy, what they're doing with AI is so fascinating because it's this concept of we fear AI just as a means to solve the assignment and to cut corners. But the whole Khan Academy mindset was now, what if that young kid who's forced to read that book about, insert whatever book we all had to read, could have a conversation with the main character? Why did you do that? What were you thinking when you said this? And what they're finding is they're developing, these kids are developing a love of learning rather than being forced to read, Anne of Green Gables. Instead, they're having a conversation with her, and they're learning more. And then they're taking those conversations that are happening between student and machine, and then they're bringing it to the classroom. And everyone else is now having an elevated conversation, but they're not letting the AI replace what Matthew was talking about. They're allowing it to kind of integrate. And I love thinking of me at age 8 when I didn't want to read a book, being able to find a fire that I had to find way later in life. So to the professors, all you educators, as you think, wow, what are those educators and teachers doing at a younger age, not only to introduce my students to AI in a healthy and ethical way, but helping them catch the fire of education rather than the metaphorical filling the bucket.
Yeah, great example. Anyone else have anything to share? No. What's a sales skill that's becoming more valuable, not less, in the AI era? Who would like to kick us off for that one? A sales skill that's becoming more valuable, not less, in the AI era. I've given Matthew the nod, whether he likes it or not.
Thanks. I'd say two other peers that spoke did a better job than I will on the emotional intelligence side. Clearly, EQ in the selling process, the humanization, that's certainly a differentiator. We're not replacing that. When you think about strategic enterprise deals, people are not signing $1 million contracts through bots. That's not happening, right? So we're still engaging like we traditionally engage at more upscale segmentation. But from a core skill set perspective, I would say business acumen. So as we know, we're all educators in this room. There's two parts of business acumen. One is, the financial literacy, the P&L and the numbers and so on, right? The business literacy side. The other side is what I think will never be going anywhere, which is the ability to take a bunch of information, connect the dots, as Steve Jobs says, and the acumen side, making a quick decision in real time. So again, I go back to augmented intelligence. We use the platforms to ingest some data, then we make sense of it, and then we can make a decision based on it. So I don't see the decision, executive level decision function going anywhere.
Yeah, I agree with all of that, and then I'm not sure if Matthew mentioned it, but the emotional intelligence piece, and then the other side of that is being able to build those interpersonal relationships in order to grow and develop. Not only the relationships with the sales process, but growth and development is incredibly important for all of us. We're in a role, we learn the business to a certain extent, but the business environment is changing quite frequently. And I think that one of the concerns might be is that if we exclusively rely on this technology to feed us with information, that's all well and good. We're going to get, for the most part, valuable and hopefully highly accurate information, but what we're neglecting is to challenge ourselves to grow and develop, not only intelligently, emotionally, which will allow us to expand our potential and our growth model, which will obviously lead to long-term and future success.
I'm not sure as a society we're getting significantly better at the art of persuasion, and I think that's something we need to hold on to and improve. In society, loud wins, flashy wins, sexy wins, but when it comes to actual persuasion, I don't know if we're there, and that's something that I don't want to turn over and say that AI is the solution for. And I think step one in the art of persuasion is listening. And we know AI can listen, and it can listen really well, but when you think of your favorite people, your absolute favorite people on the earth, odds are they're probably pretty good listeners, and not listening to respond, but listening to understand. Those are my favorite people. The people that, whether it's in a business, a professional, or a personal standpoint, they're the ones that can listen. They can actively listen. I can tell they're engaged. And then they think for a minute, and then they provide a thoughtful response. And having that in humanity still is something that I think is so important to teach our students. The value of something that we learn the moment we enter school is the power of listening.
Anything to add, Roger?
I agree strongly with Matthew's comment around decision-making and leadership. I would just say that it's people's job to set organizations and initiatives and projects and tasks in motion to shape what values constrain those tasks, to decide who is a customer, who's not a customer, to determine strategy, to determine what exists and why. If we're using the autopilot analogy, to choose which autopilot to use, to QA it, and so on. So I think all of those things exist 10 years from now and now. They're just probably a significantly greater percentage of people's calendar.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. So just to summarize what I took notes on here is decision-making with business acumen, the art of persuasion. Listening is a big one, and I love that you said that, listen to understand, because most people, especially if they have a prompt, they're waiting for a word and then going for that rebuttal or whatever that next step is. And EQ, and this just supports the stat I read last year from Salesforce saying buyers' number one challenge is they don't feel sellers understand their needs. And so when they're not feeling heard, they're not feeling understood. And when you think about they can't make a decision, they don't understand the business acumen, they're not listening, this supports and validates what they're feeling. So great responses there, folks. How do we teach students to think critically about when to trust AI and when to trust their own judgment? And there was a question this morning talked about shame. Do I feel shame like I'm cheating? I'm using the algorithm and not me. So how do you balance that and teach them to think critically about when to trust AI versus their own judgment? Who would like to tackle that one first?
I would say, and this may sound pretty simple, but when it's a question that you have that has a structured, I'm trying to think of a metaphor or analogy, if exclusively trust AI if it's a math problem, if that makes sense, But I think they have to be able to trust their own intuition when there's a lot of other factors that go into how they're going to develop that decision and ultimately their final solution. I think, you can't ask AI and expect it to give you an accurate example of, how much does my customer value my business? But you can trust AI to say, if we have $1 million in revenue at 25% margin, my operating costs are 10%, what's my profitability going to look like? So I think, using an analogy like that, that's when I would trust it more exclusively and then rely on personal intuition and intellect and education.
I don't know, and I think it's safe to say that. I think it's okay that sometimes we just don't know, and vulnerability goes a long way. I feel imposter syndrome constantly when I send an email that was partially or fully generated by AI that I stuck my name on. I feel shame is the word we used earlier. It just feels icky at times to use AI when it probably shouldn't. It's okay. I don't feel that same way when I use other things that have been created to help make my life easier. But I think it's important that when we're all experiencing some sense of whether it's imposter syndrome or a little discomfort, to kind of throw it out there and let our students know that it's okay to feel that way or that you're feeling that way, and then that's kind of the start. But I don't know when's the delineated line to say it's okay to move forward with confidence.
Yeah, I would say that to add is, I think it's a feedback loop. So our role or the student's role or the sales professional's role is to, obviously use some of the information and intelligence from the various technologies, but to provide the feedback loop, to do the iteration, to do the course correction, because we know that, what we all have as a constant is this change, right? There's constant change. So, AI and technology has to be adaptive, but the authors of the adaptation is the human element to be able to course correct and react to these externalities, because you can't just sort of set it and forget it, as it were. It's up to us to use our intelligence and have the technology work for us. And then lastly, I'd say from a student, how do we enable students? I think we may have gotten away from some of the core critical thinking and analytical skills that that the liberal arts programs have taught for decades. My bachelor's degree, I'm actually a liberal arts graduate, and for my bachelor's and then MBA for the master's. But when I think of the core skill sets that liberal arts education or any other social science education, it teaches you how to think broadly, think critically, and from a deliverable perspective in your syllabus, go back to those article critiques. Go back to using some of those traditional ways to think. What's the social context? What's the historical perspective? What's the language, impact on language, gender, culture, etc.? Think more broadly about these themes and build that muscle of always asking why. So that way, technology is not sort of leading us off and we're sort of in control.
Okay, thank you. Roger.
I think I have a contrarian answer to this, but the question was, when should you trust AI and when should you trust your judgment? I would say you should always trust your judgment, that you should subordinate AI as a tool that helps you accelerate the process of considering something, but always trust your judgment. And I think that applies no matter how powerful or how cheap reasoning models get. I think it should be subordinate to human goals. I think it should be subordinate to human judgment. So I would just say, always trust your judgment.
So based on that and everything you shared, do you think confidence plays a role here? When you think about trusting your judgment and outsourcing everything to AI versus saying, hey, I've been doing this for 5 years, 10 years, How much of it is there an element of self-belief and confidence? Does that play into this, do you feel? Brennan, did you want to comment?
Yeah, and I think there's both sides of that. So yes, confidence is important, and we should value experience and people who have done it and been in the trenches. On the flip side, I work with a lot of people and around a lot of people who will bury their head in the sand and will not touch AI because they know better. And so they won't embrace things that will make their life easier because they know better. So I think there's both sides where we should, as was just said, kind of embrace what it can do for us, but always trust our judgment. But then we all work with people who don't want to touch it because they know better. And that's a hard one to pull them back into the fold.
Yeah, I'd say you should always trust it as a suggestion or guidance. But as to Roger's point, obviously, you know, trusting your gut and your experience, your personal experience, your own intelligence, it should almost always take precedence over what a technology model has given you as guidance. There's many other factors that you can't type in to explain the environment, explain the challenge, explain the the situation at hand. So I think your brain's going to work collectively with the guidance that the technology is giving you, and finding that balance. And you have to be confident in yourself to trust your final judgment at the end of the day, because if you have a situation where you completely bury your head in the sand and you completely ignore or avoid it, or conversely, you truly believe in everything the machine's going to tell you, it's eliminating your ability to think, and it's discounting all of your life experience and intelligence that you've developed over the years, which has hopefully led you to a better place.
Roger, Matthew, anything to add?
One thing I would say is when I first started my career, I started working for a Bell subsidiary. So I came from the telecom world in the late 90s, and the new medium that was being used for sales outreach was this thing called the phone. And I remember having this debate with my sales leader at the time, because he was of the mindset that from a prospecting perspective, it ought to be done via cold knock. And if anyone spent a long time in sales, they know what I mean by a cold knock. And a cold knock is essentially showing up, unannounced. And if we think about where we've come from then till now, someone could be exceptionally efficient with cold knocks, but we should at least explore what are the advantages with this communication, and how may it help me. Also, at some point in your career, you're probably going to want to be a people manager or leader. So for our students, it's saying don't be afraid of it. And as we know, it's a muscle, right? Put the reps in. AI may sound like a scary thing, but so was email when we first started sending out cold emails. And so was cold calling before there was such a thing, using the phone, right? And now with social and video, it's just new technology. So I think that the more you use it, exercise, put the reps in as a muscle, I think your confidence level is going to go up, and thus your competence will be the result.
I think as salespeople, that willingness to try there, knowing that failure will be part of it to certain degrees, but just trying, because there might be people who are resistant to change regardless, right? And this might be an example of where that's showing up. So thank you for that. As we move into 2025, what's one shift you believe educators must make to prepare the next generation of sales professionals to work with AI, not be replaced by it? So what's one shift you believe educators must make to prepare the next gen? To work with AI, not be replaced with it, knowing that it's changing at a rapid pace. Roger, did you want to kick us off?
Think about how AI itself might be overwhelming your customer, and see if there's a way that you can use it on their behalf to achieve the goal that they have.
So flip the lens, I like that.
I think from my perspective is that you have to just find that balance with utilizing AI. It's not about exclusively utilizing it throughout your sales process, and it's not about completely eliminating from it, but you have to use that with balance and be objective in the environment, the situation, know your audience, because you will have an audience out there that puts much less value on the technology, the AI itself. So if you get into a one-dimensional mindset where you exclusively or non-exclusively use it, it's going to limit your opportunity for success.
I would welcome the students bringing AI solutions to the classroom, letting you vet them and decide what to implement. We as a digital publisher don't have all the right answers. So, Jeremy gets up and shows us a cool new tool today, and I start sending it to my C-suite team, which, by the way, they've been on call too and trying to book a demo with the AI bot. And it's important that we don't come to the equation thinking that we have all the answers and all the solutions. So I would say a shift that's important is embrace and welcome students bringing new solutions to the classroom that you may find to be the most efficient way to work with AI in the class.
I'll just go back to my first comment about the little experiment I did, human versus machine. So I think as educators, it is an imperative. It is an absolute imperative that we expose our students to this technology, because if we don't, we're not preparing them for what inevitably they're going to end up in the workforce. So it's our job to expose them to that. But of course, to Eric's point, have that balance between what the technology can do and then integrating the soft skills from a human perspective.
Mm-hmm. So model the behavior. If you're not trying it, you can't expect them to try it. So excellent. Okay. What's one skill or mindset students must develop now to remain relevant in a sales world shaped by AI? So what's one skill or mindset we have to develop to remain relevant in a sales world shaped by AI? Considering all the things we talked about, resistance to change, judgment, fear.
I'd say willingness. Anyone who's willing to come to the table and learn, anyone who's willing to try, anyone who's willing to improve the soft skills, anyone who's willing to spend more time in AI, a bit of willingness goes a long way.
Okay.
I think you have to incorporate that self-motivation, that willingness and interest in the growth and development and working at a faster pace too as well. I think that, I can speak for myself. My son's 19 years old. He's in Fanshawe College, and I look at him, I have a tremendous amount of respect, and he's a great kid, but I look at him as having, some of the motivation that I did, but not near as enough as I think he's going to need to succeed in the world moving forward, because, he could be competing with machines. He could be, competing with technology on a much higher level. So I think, you incorporate that motivation and also the benefits of what the advantages that technology can provide you. If you incorporate the two together, then he's probably going to be on a pathway to success.
I've never heard someone refer to another person as too focused. So I would argue the mindset of being insanely focused is what I would advocate for.
You're good. Okay, so willingness, self-motivation, and focused. All great answers. If you had to give students one AI-proof piece of advice today for their sales career, what would it be? So they're in your 4th-year program. They're about to get out and join big tech. What's one piece of advice you'd share with them? See, Roger's got a smile.
So I always think about how when we fundraise for our business, our later stage investors that were giving us large amounts of money, they obviously background checked us with our early stage investors. But then at a certain point, I found out that our early stage investors actually background checked us with the startup accelerator that we did, who background checked us with my manager in my prior job, who they happened to know, who I had references for from a prior job. And then so on back, all the way back to when I was a teenager, that I provided a reference in order to get my first job. And I just think about how much trust compounds, and how in 2021 we got a preemptive financing offer for $40 million US, meaning someone just basically emailed me one day and they're like, we researched your space and we want to fund you in this way. That pretty much was just based on a chain of trust that started when I was 16. So I would just say, if there's one thing that students do control, it's that they can be honest and they can be forthcoming and they can be straightforward. They don't have to be the best, but people will remember that. and maybe one of you guys will end up being a reference for them, and that will compound through their career. That seems like something that they control in that moment, and that is essentially important.
I think there's probably an expectation from the employer side that when students finish their education, they're going to come out with some unique perspective, some unique skill sets as a result of just going through, a 2-year program, 4-year program, or what have you. So, one thing I would leave them with is leverage some of the new technology for interesting use cases. So there's one use case I do with the course that I teach, and I have students do a demand generation video. So they actually create a outreach video using, you can use any of the free tools out there. Wistica is one, or if you can get a free version of Vidyard, and have the students, craft an outbound demand generation message with content tailored to an ICP, and then actually send that video out. And it's a tool that they can use when they're finished from the point of view of, imagine if they're applying for a job and the employer actually got a video, a personalized, humanized video of them showing one screen of all the research they've done on this role, and then articulating what they could actually bring to the table for the job. Imagine the differentiation. So, what could we use technology while we're in school to be a differentiator when we get on the other side with employers?
We still very much live in a it's all who you know kind of world, and I'd give the advice that don't let the noise of AI cloud you to the fact that the person sitting next to you in the class could be the very person that you need to call on later in life for some help. And so as cliche as it is, like, your network really is your net worth, and there's value to putting your hand out and introducing yourself and getting to know people. And that hustle and sweat equity that comes with building genuine friendships really does pay off later in sales careers.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more with all those points. I think that, the one thing you can't replace, technology or not, is character, integrity, ethics, self-drive, motivation, intelligence. You can't get that from a machine. To all those points, that's who the individual is. Over time, I think that they'll be in equal, if not better, position to succeed at the same rate as a machine or technology advice, but you can't replace that. And sometimes you can't get that back either, some of the points that I have. So I think that if we instill those morals and ethics in the sales force, the leaders of tomorrow, I think we'll be in a much better place.
Okay, excellent, thank you. So I heard trust, honesty, moral ethics, and video. And what I love about video is the blending of the both. So you're leveraging the technology, but there's a human on the other end. So there's emotion. You can convey that you are a person. So I think that's great. Thank you very much. Can we get a round of applause for our panelists, please? Now, just quick poll of the audience. How many of you, show of hands, felt like you moved up a notch? So if you're a 5 coming in, are you a 6? Okay, can we get a raise of hands? You're leaving with an elevated sense of AI, and hopefully you will take some of these tools back and apply it in the classroom so that we can move the needle with the students as well. So thank you very much.
What's that? Very nice.
Thank you so much, Karen, for your thoughtful moderation and summarizing the findings after each question. That's really amazing. And to our esteemed panel. Diverse opinions, lots of really violent agreement, which is so interesting, and really ultimately pro-human. And I think it's such an interesting time where for our students and for ourselves, our biggest differentiation is going to come down to our humanity. And so technology's great. It can democratize a lot, but ultimately it comes down to who we are and what we do and how we do what we do as that connector. And so I think that was actually quite inspiring in terms of how we can live with AI in that way.